Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by 10th Man, Neil, the Adam Meakin, Arwin, Refracted Curvature and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Afternoon.
Afternoon.
How are you?
How you doing, Neil?
How you doing?
How you doing?
Very good friend's impression of a Yankee. Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle by way of a curved adjacent? Earth is flat. That's why we lead with this question, and there's total silence as a result. That's fair enough. It's going to take a while, even for our own side, to appreciate the power of this question. This proves Earth is flat. Both sides of the argument must accept the flatness, and if they have any preconceived notions of sphericity, they have to correct those to be flat in order to acquire an elevation angle.
I was going to say, it's got nothing to do with the nature of the Earth, but what a load of geometric claptrap is to try and claim you can have a curved line to form an angle.
You can't.
No, as Rob Durham said, and not humans, even to the logic through human, but to ask a computer, an unbiased computer, the computer says no. No angle there to measure.
Does not compute. That's why we lead with it. That's the proof. That's the proof we are standing on a flat plane. Obviously, observably, measurably, navigatably flat plane that we must have and must be accepted by both sides, including any prerequisite that they must have a sphere beneath their feet corrected to be flat in order to measure any angle ever off the plane that we stand upon. The second question we ask is the 2020 Black Swan devastation, which is any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as Earth curve.
No, you're going to need R for that. And if they're going to bring their Earth curve, then that means they believe you can get an angle with a curved adjacent.
So down one at number 2 in terms of the top arguments we present here. The claim that we're on a sphere comes with a claim of a physical sphere edge. That's Earth curve. And that's your horizon if you believe you're on a sphere. And we've debunked that. The horizon is not Earth curve. You'll need R for that? Yeah, you'll need that physical geometric sphere edge formerly known as Earth curve to derive R. And you can't. We've debunked it. So there is no R. Any evidence of the R value?
Yeah, but they're not accepting it because if you look for globe proofs, that's the same one. Ships disappearing whole first over the horizon. So,
Yeah, that's Earth curve. We've debunked it. If the Earth was a sphere with a radius of 3959 miles, that's the R value, then every distance to the horizon, that's the physical geometric limitation called Earth curve, could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That's the Earth curve mathematics. Distance to the horizon in the Black Swan image, as we have dubbed it, is beyond the limitations of a sphere Earth with a radius 3959. The distance to the geometric physical sphere edge Earth curve horizon would be 1.2 miles, as the observation's at 1 foot. And it's beyond 10 miles of observation, with the oil rig standing at just over 9.5 miles. So you've got a horizon that's beyond the limitations of a physical sphere edge called Earth curve. We debunked it. We don't have Earth curve for a horizon. There is no Earth curve.
Well, as far as R goes, you would have to accept curvature to assert the Earth has a radius value, and then you would have to deny elevation angles exist as a consequence of that belief.
Nice way to round it out when asking for R. If you're going to claim you can get it or use it, you're going to need a flat plane for it. Those angle measurements are going to require that you take an elevation angle to make the claim that you can derive an R value. Well, that means you need a flat plane for that R value.
Nathan, two slides up on Master B once Adam's done.
I would just say that was the point of John's demonstration yesterday when he went to demonstrate the sphericity of his kitchen. He did start with the disclaimer first that all of these measurements that he's taking are taken from a flat planar surface for him to derive the angles to prove how curved that flat surface is. That is one of the... Is that the Brywinian paradox they're in there? But that's the reality of it. To take the angle, you need the flat surface first. And I think yesterday's tongue-in-cheek effort, I think, demonstrated that very well. What they're doing in their mass, and what they're reifying, and what they're taking to reify the ball.
Yeah, they can't look to my over-exaggerated version of it and say it's false without disclaiming their own model by proxy.
I don't see how it's over-exaggerated. It's the same.
I used the Muppet and acted silly.
Oh, the presentation, the formatting. Okay, yeah, okay, fine.
And I compare that to Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's not a Muppet with a silly voice.
Yeah, but the maths is the same. The presentation might be descended into dumbed down fast to a degree, but ultimately what you're presenting is just their maths and their methodology to derive a spherical radius for your house. That's the same methodology. Doesn't matter what you're using. Your justification for a physical obstruction at the wall rather than the horizon, yeah, that could also argue is slightly ludicrous, but it doesn't matter. Well, why is it any less farcical to claim that a non-physical position in an apparent location that we call the horizon is in any way a physical obstruction known as Earth curve? It's no more right or wrong or less farcical in that respect. So on the one hand, I can say, yeah, you claimed your wall was the limitation to your view, and it was. So in many ways, you were saying it's less farcical, and I could also go that way. But yeah, okay, we've descended it into farce to an extent, but the maths that's being used and the methodology that's being used to derive refracted curvature, that's John, and a spherical value for his house based on angle measurements off a flat plane, that's the point we're trying to make here. It's the first housekeeping question. To then give him the trig he needs for the angles he needs to derive an R value from his flat plane. And then next thing you know, you've got houses with garages that are supposed to have the car 90 degrees positionally to you in your basement antipode and you hanging off the ceiling when you go down the stairs and all sorts of other crazy nonsense, because suddenly the area that's actually flat that he's actually contending with and actually measured to claim all this is now being claimed to be spherical. Same as the Earth. Exactly the same.
Hey, John, what was the radius of your kitchen anyway?
85 inches.
let's just go to the first slide. I've had it up for a little while, 10th.
That's funny. All right, so here's the first slide. I just want you to read the bottom left. Dip correction is eye level with the sea, and it shows the dotted line. Go up to the top, you see the sun somewhere off in the distance. It's got a zenith distance directly over the Earth somewhere. That line is not drawn, but Nathan, if you take your cursor and bring it straight down, it should hit the T and the 2, parallel to actual horizon. And that is it. That is exactly what's happening. So they are ignoring their geometric horizon that doesn't exist and only exists in the maths. It's a thought experiment. Actual horizon is the dotted line. If height of eye is 0 minutes, 0 seconds, dip correction is eye level with the C. This other line below the dotted line that you see horizon written on, they even throw that under the bus in this picture. They're not using it. That's not dip correction. Next slide. It shows dip correction using the natural horizon is needed to become a true right angle. So of course you're going to have to take it as if your eyeballs were at the sea level when you took it. So you just deduct the height above the sea level to get your right angle. The artificial horizon already gets it to your eye line because it establishes a horizontal by shooting the sun twice, and you got to half the reading. So if it says 80 degrees, it's really 40. But right there, that validates it, that on land, you can have the sextant work for you, but you've got to get a true horizontal. And at sea, prior to dip, you don't have a true horizontal. You're a little bit above, so you got to bring it down. It's not that hard, ballers. The next one. Well, here it is. That's what you're trying to establish at sea on the boat to your eye line, but it's very difficult unless that blue line, ground level, is parallel. And so that's why you do dips. So the ground level is sea level, which gives you your eye line horizontal. It's a parallel. It's the same thing with the artificial horizon and the bubble sextant.
Excellent. Very good. Bit more housekeeping. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
There's about the same amount of evidence for that as there is to the center of my presupposed spherical kitchen.
Therefore,
Well,
molten, therefore iron, therefore generating magnetic fields beyond Curie points. Is that what you're saying? Obviously, because you've derived a spherical value, it must have a molten iron core.
Well, I'm just saying there's about as much evidence for their molten iron core as there is for the molten iron core at the center of my kitchen sphere.
If we ignore the standard of what would be evidence, that would be proof, then none, right? But we've got what people think is evidence, cartoon imagery and stories about it. Which I'm sure you could produce at a pinch, right, John? You could scribble up a few pictures of the core at the centre of your presupposed spherical domain.
Well, that is why I was thinking of creating a ball and transposing my coordinate systems of my kitchen onto that ball so that I can then cut it in half and describe to you what's happening inside that ball.
I mean, if you could produce that depictorially, I'd appreciate it for a thumbnail, for sure.
Now go to work.
Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Hold on. There's still something about that, because what's gaining traction now with these anti-flat earthers and ballers is that tsunami caused by the volcanoes erupting. It came up again yesterday on QE show. They were trying to say that the way they measured it, where the volcanoes, where the tsunamis were happening, it can only happen on a ball.
Because
Adam knows more about it. Adam, you were breaking it down yesterday. You there?
Yeah. Well, I was exposed to it yesterday. Betty was saying a few bits, but my only point was that they seem to be making the proof that it's spherical is that the timings of the tsunami wave match their ball distances, but it doesn't match the straw man that they build for the flat earth model. Therefore, it must be a ball. But again, it's timings. Timings doesn't seem to have anything to do with nature, orientation. It's literally just the timing of a tsunami wave. But I said that seems to be the crux of their argument, that the timings, the distances seem to match, a bit like transatlantic flights, Pacific
Can I
flights.
ask a quick
etc.
question then, Adam? When you say they match, do they match with a ball model that was derived by a flat plane elevation angle measurement in the first instance?
Yeah,
I mean, so they're claiming a flat Earth proof then?
pretty much in a way, isn't it? But to me, there's no claim there. All you're saying is it took this long. But your point of argument that you've got against the flat earther is, but on your model, which they kindly built for us, it doesn't match. Well, that's just a complete straw man, isn't it? All you've done is say on your azimuthal projection of a ball, those distances are longer, and the wave would have took longer to reach that point on my straw man.
Of
So
a ball,
I don't see that.
we've got to get these disclaimers in it. I know it's going to be adding to the mouthful of words that has to come out without getting an interruption from me, but I apologise in advance. From a ball, so the azimuthal equidistant projection of a ball that was made with elevation angle measurements off a flat plane, correct?
Yeah.
Just to get that clear, as Brian's just joined, I wouldn't want Brian to tell me off.
Yeah.
Well, you know that the ballers, considering it's a tsunami, will just hand wave dismiss this.
Okay, can I just point something out about Brian as he's just joined, right? So over the last week, I've been in and out of hospital with a head injury. Not that many people would particularly know that, or it matters not. Other than during that time, having had a concussion and prolonged period of pain, I got back home. Start watching a video that I can hardly hear because my ears are full of blood, and I leave a comment about it. Just a minor point about a video I happened to watch in one of the chat feeds, right? That I don't normally interact with, but obviously I'm ill and I'm just sat there in pain. And what I got back from Brian was, yeah, I know you've banged your head, right? But if you present this shit here, right, I won't fucking tolerate it. That's what I got from Brian. That was the level of sympathy I got from Brian. Don't post
Way
shit
to go,
here.
Brian.
You will experience more pain. That's what I got from Brian.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to be unsympathetic, but I had to say something.
Yeah, you weren't having it. There was no excuses, and you took them away before telling me off. Don't care what the excuse is. Don't care how hard you've banged your head. Post shit here, expect pain, was the impression I got. Anywho, good to have you, Brian.
Thanks, Nathan. I'm going to be on mute because I'm driving and I'm going into a bank and a hospital and all this sort of stuff. So I'm just going to have to listen in for the next hour.
Fair enough.
I'll try and come in when I can, okay? Thank you.
So we got to scientific evidence of gravity, but then backtracked to the prior question. So is there any? I'll take that as a no. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
We're still waiting. It's not impossible, but it's probably going to involve R.
It won't be a viable hypothesis in that case.
No.
What about any evidence that you can have gas pressure without a container?
With John's kitchen, he put an end to that and pointed out he did have containment with the roof. So, no, pressure requires containment.
I didn't think I'd have to do this, but I was actually talking about the more wider Western world belief that the sky is a vacuum, not necessarily John's example of a spherical house domain with a contained gas. No.
I'm a fully converted into ball kitchen. Yeah, I've seen the maths. It's therefore true.
Maths is reality, so therefore John's house is spherical, right? No.
Yeah. He showed me the numbers. I was actually shown the numbers by a unicorn, so it's got to be true.
Yes, that's right. The unicorn made a presentation. That doesn't add or subtract from the mathematical value, which is 0, in terms of proving that his house actually does exist in a spherical capacity. It doesn't. And he had to derive it from flat angle measurements in the first place, like with the globe Earth. Obviously, that being the more wider-reaching Western worldview, Adam.
I mean, obviously, we know the kitchen floor is flat, so that it has to be, so we can take the angles to prove how much curves in it.
You hear that,
Well, at
Fundies?
least-
Can you repeat that, Adam?
At least,
We know the kitchen floor is flat. It has to be so that we can obtain the angle, so we can prove how curved it is.
Unlucky
Yeah,
Fundies.
yeah.
Go on, 10th.
yeah, well, at least John showed us the wall, the geometric horizon that the ballers can't show us.
Yeah. We are literally going to hang on this rather than the Western worldview that the Earth is a sphere with a sky vacuum in violation of the second law of thermodynamics and a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon based on begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking Earth curve maths. We're going to focus on John's spherical kitchen, right? Okay?
Yeah, absolutely, because it is a perfect way of sharing the information is using another subject, another place, another thing. And so when you take what they say reality is, and you use the same math, the same logic that they think is logic, and apply it to John's kitchen, voila. Why should they knock it? We're just using their words the way they arrived to it. They would just use John's kitchen to show the absurdity of it all.
Absolutely
To be
agree.
honest.
It just takes me to be in slight defiance for that to be detailed, and then it be, a home run for the audience.
John's kitchen, it appears as a model. It appears less problematic. We just covered the gas pressure one, and he's got an answer straight away. None of this gravity nonsense. He's confirms with physics. Yep, I've got a roof on that thing.
That's right. And if you're hungry for information, it's the right place to be.
And for fear of people claiming that this direct analogy to what was just said a moment ago being made in the comments section, there's a roof on us. Also, by comparison, we can't have gas pressure without containment. So no more 2 container demonstrations on our horizon?
I can add one.
Oh, add third container, or add an extra example?
Add an extra example, but it also has containers, but in some way the ballers think it demonstrates no containment.
Let's
They've
hear
been
it.
talking about how ionized gases can be held in this chamber whereby they create a magnetic field, and then there's no direct
Oh,
container
let him say it. Let him say
containing the
it. This
gas.
might be new to the
but yet-
audience, Adam. Go ahead, Fire Solar.
Just trying to say it is making me laugh, but they claim that by creating a magnetic field, you can contain gases, ionized gases, and that's a perfect demonstration of the air which we breathe being not requiring containment.
I see. Go ahead, Adam.
So they put these ionized gases in a what before they're going to contain them with in a container, basically.
You don't have to answer that. It's not a fair question Adam's
Yes.
asking. Totally unreasonable that you should ask
But
that, Adam.
once-
How dare you?
But once it's actually turned on, then it's contained inside of the container, and it's not the walls of the container containing it. So therefore,
Did they
No,
take the walls away
victory
to
lap.
prove that? Or did they keep
No,
it
but
in the container and say, yeah, it's contained within the container in its own containment?
Look, inside the
That.
container, you've got gas pressure without a container. What's your problem?
exactly, well summarized.
Alrighty then. Yes, that was also quite amusing when it first came up. Because the people punting it, what I like about these sorts of claims, because that's a good couple of years old, maybe more. As old as the gas pressure without a container argument, at least. When it was first put to us, the fatal flaw in the argument hadn't been spotted by the people who punted it, which is yesterday we were saying, oh, we shouldn't laugh at these people. Their pain is not amusing. But there are things that happen when people are experiencing cognitive dissonance that are very amusing, and that was one of them. Yeah, so let me hear it one more time. You take a container and you create gas pressure without a container in the container. You don't see the problem in this. No, there's gas pressure without a container in the container.
Another problem.
Go on.
The other problem, it's a false equivalence fallacy, because we're asking how can you have gas pressure without a container, not how you can have plasma pressure without a container. It's two different states of matter.
If I call it ionized gas, what was the term used again?
Plasma.
Was it actually just plasma? That wasn't the words that was used by Flat Earth Solar.
It was ionized gas.
There you
That's how
go.
they
That's got the
tried
word
to
gas in it.
Bring it back. Yeah, proven. The contained gas inside of the container, that's demonstrating no containment
It's
required.
not gas pressure without a container. Plus, you got a container, like they said. It's a false equivalence. Ionized gas is plasma. That's a different state of matter. False equivalence.
What about liquidized gas? Can I use that?
Liquidized gas. Oh, that's a good one.
What about
LPG,
gaseous
man.
gas?
What's your problem? LPG.
It's my problem. It's a married bachelor. It's the problem.
What about if I take the gas and I squash it really, really close together so it behaves a bit like liquid?
It behaves like liquid, or is it a liquid? What are the four states of matter? Well, there's a couple more. We'll just deal with four.
Solid.
Then they like to
Liquid.
use the word fluid instead of liquid. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a
that's
fluid
not a
has a
state of
fluid
matter,
dynamic.
Yeah, thanks. That's
If
not a state of
something-
matter.
John, if something's behaving like a liquid, wouldn't then be behaving like a gas at the same time, would it? If it was under immense pressure, it started to exhibit liquid behavior. By definition, it would stop exhibiting gas behavior.
Yeah, but the gas is experiencing liquid-like behaviour. Focus on the gas bit, because that's the bit that might weasel us an answer from a fundy with a globe belief. What's your problem?
Well, now changing pressure can also change the temperature at which a phase change will be induced too. So there's that to discuss within it, isn't there?
The question is, can you have gas pressure without a container?
No, you can't.
Thank you.
But if we have two containers, then I can show you gas pressure without a container.
All right,
In
we're
the
going to
container.
classify this as the infinite container fallacy.
The Russian nesting doll fallacy.
Yep. If you can take it far enough away from the original containment that's required to make your example, it can almost seem like you can have gas pressure without a container. Kind of a bit like talking about deltas of gas pressure that's already got containment in order to be achieved. You can talk about the gas pressure gradient after the gradient has been formed because you've got containment to form it. Just ignore the containment required to form it bit and focus on the delta of the claim in the first instance that you've got a sky vacuum, which would be to say that we've got gas pressure that we're all breathing without containment for it. Ludicrous. Violation of natural law.
We got flat
That
earthers
would also
saying
be
it
a
now.
red herring fallacy.
What's a red herring fallacy?
As soon as they go to, excuse me, as soon as they remove the gas pressure gradients, that's a red herring fallacy to the question.
Indeed.
Yeah. Do you remember how Professor Phil solved the problem?
Why?
No,
By
he
bashing
said
his
it's-
face in with a spade shovel?
Well, sure, but he basically said it's a gradient vacuum all the way to the edge of the universe, which is the
That's
container.
second law of thermodynamics violation. He doesn't know where the edge of the universe is.
A gradient vacuum. That sounds like a married bachelor too.
A gradient vacuum.
Yeah,
It's
it's a new product from Dyson.
No, let's just redefine what a vacuum is. Right? That's what it is.
Yeah, you got it. That's also Xanax claim that there's actually a vacuum here on the surface, and it's just radiated at different levels as you
Well,
go higher.
that's probably
It's a
down to
partial vacuum.
That's probably down to a NASA claim. I'm sure I've read somewhere in terms of NASA's terminology that the edge of space does actually begin at ground level.
Correct.
According
So you're
to-
actually standing
according-
in the vacuum of space.
Yeah,
at the
ground level.
moment.
Yeah. And then there's varying degrees of vacuum moving up. So that's in line with heliocentrism, actually, as farcical as it sounds.
Well, according to some flat earthers, there's no pressure here at all.
Let's not worry about those idiots. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
Are you going to use elevation angles to assert a distance?
I'm not.
Then no, we don't really have anything.
But that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of stuff being used with angles to these celestial objects. So, come on, someone's got to step up and give us a distance to it. Because I say so, obviously that means that we've got to. Because that's how it works.
Well, the people say 93 million miles away. Heliocentrists say 93 million miles away.
Yeah, that includes a contradiction, though. The angle measurement's taken off a flat plane to derive an R value, and that R value that's derived from the flat plane is inserted into the calculation to give you the distance at 93 million miles. So based on a spherical R value that's derived from a flat plane, and then when you're going to verify it well off the ground by angle measurement, well, that's a flat plane measurement also. So that has a contradiction in it. No, not 93 million miles. You'll need R, and R will be derived from a flat plane. Self-defeating.
Because it's an apparent position, it would only seem sensible to use an apparent distance and an apparent unit. So the only number I put on it is 3 Arwinian units.
An Arwinian unit, by the way, is the distance to a rainbow. Or is it a moon? Oh, God, I'm always getting this wrong.
And what's the distance to a rainbow or the moon?
There is no
There's an answer to that. 1/3 the distance to the sun, if I'm correct in 1 Arwinian unit being the distance to a rainbow, and 3 Arwinian units being the distance to the sun. I believe 2 Arwinian units is the distance to the moon. So it's 1/3 the distance to the sun. Half the distance to the moon. There you go. What's wrong with that?
Well, as Chocolate would say, that checks out.
Yeah, it does check out.
Go then.
And since you're not the one saying it, you're citing someone else. It has to be true.
And if it's not, then that's not my problem. I can immediately defer my defeat to the person I cited, because that's perfectly reasonable.
And he's probably shopping right now, so we don't even know.
Exactly. He doesn't know how big a problem I'm developing for him, you citing him like this.
I want to know what the distance to the sun in John's kitchen is.
Sun? You mean lighting fixture?
Yes, whatever his sun is. What's the distance?
I just want to know how we can worship it. I want to know how we can put that lighting fixture at the centre of our life and bow down to it and worship it, my friend. I don't know about distance. Worship is much higher on my priority list.
Well, we have NASA fanboys. Now we got John fanboys.
The lighting fixtures in my kitchen are assumed to be infinitely distant.
It's the only way to resolve the mathematics, you see.
True.
Otherwise it gets too complicated.
And that's only an assumption. It's not unreasonable to just make that assumption.
Because in both models, it's a known fact that all of these things have accepted positions. To use the accepted positions would create a problem that the model didn't work. And therefore we ignore that and we put everything to infinity in both ball and kitchen model.
I'm glad you clarified it as ball and kitchen model. They're essentially the same thing. They've just got, slightly different parameters for the original measurements to give you distances and radii. So they're different in that respect, but the maths and the derivations are the same.
Yeah. Do you remember when, at the beginning of this conversation, people started triangulating the sun and coming out with a distance of 3,000 miles? And then flat earthers were all claiming the sun is 3,000 miles away?
Yeah.
That was given to us.
Hold on. Are you there? Oh, Brian's driving, isn't he? There's a big problem with that in terms of if you ignore perspective and back away from something, the distance is just going to change, isn't it? Till you get to 0 with it above you.
Good point. But wouldn't that change the elevation angle accordingly, and that you'd still get a 3,000 mile distance?
It doesn't
Only
change.
if you're using two
No.
points of triangulation, because once you add multiple points, we start getting the sun in apparently different locations.
Well, I can't explain
Hello?
why. I can explain what. And what occurs in terms of the position of a given star above a given location. That is, it's seemingly set in stone and very, very predictable. Now, as a consequence of where the star's going to lie at 90 degrees to a person below it on the ground, or depending on where it is and you're measuring it with triangulation, it could be above the sea, just to give you your positional data. But we'll take it as read that in this example, there's someone actually stood below it on the ground when you look at it from your position out at sea for the sake of argument. Well, that predictability in terms of where it will be above means that you can map it out with a 2-for-1 special in terms of the angle versus the number of miles from your position to that position where the star is above. Now, that's very useful. Does it mean that I can derive the height? No. Does it mean that that can be put to practical application? Absolutely, and is.
Yeah, you're just utilizing the angle and the ground measurement. You don't know the actual height.
No, but I do know it's above a particular location on the ground at a given time. And that seems to always work as a result of people having a good base knowledge of what the stars do and how they move and where they will be at a given time over what piece of land. And lo and behold, if you were to check and look up, yeah, that star's directly above me.
Are you asserting that the sun is a star?
Well, I wasn't thinking of a star in that example, but if you want to, it doesn't matter what you define it as. I don't care what you think or anyone thinks the sun is. I don't know. So therefore, if you say it's the same but larger as the things that appear in the night, I can give you a whole list of things that make it fundamentally different. Doesn't mean it's not. I don't know. I'd argue just as much for someone saying that it isn't a star. That's what I'm trying to get at. Because I don't know, and I know that the person claiming it's not going to have just a bigger job as proving it one way or the other when they claim it. Saying it isn't, it's like, well, anything's possible. You haven't disproven that. I don't know that that isn't the case, because I don't know what it is. So how am I supposed to know what it isn't? It's just as equally unknown.
Mm.
Well, now you can know that it's not a ball of gas in a vacuum. That would be a violation
Yes,
of natural law.
I can list a whole bunch of things that I know it isn't just by virtue of knowing that it isn't a bloody unicorn or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
False. We already proved that it could be a ball of gas.
Might be.
Yeah, in a glass
Stands in-
Tacamac reactor that's floating above the surface.
But that description comes from a heliocentric world with a sky vacuum, which puts that claim in violation of the second law of thermodynamics. No, it's not a burning ball of gas in a sky vacuum. That violates natural law, and that's where that originates from. Now, okay, you could say, well, they're just looking at it and measuring the light. Therefore, spectroscopy's hinting at what it might be. Doesn't necessarily put it in a sky vacuum. It's like, well, okay, maybe I can lend some credence to it. And then you rip apart the notion of having any sort of control over looking through a whole load of whatever you may or may not appreciate. If you're claiming it's a vacuum but you don't know, then you don't know what you're measuring through, and therefore the claims are all bunk, like they would be in a heliocentric world anyway. So you go, well, back to we not knowing anything about it really. Having a little guess with spectroscopy seems like a very blunt tool to make any claims about this item in the sky.
Yeah, let's be clear. What Nathan elucidated there is that you need validation of the media between point A and point B in order to make assumptions about the way light's traveling between you and it and what it's doing.
Yeah, and what we've got to go on is a lie. Sky vacuum is what is claimed. Now, if you take that information and just bastardize a bit out for reasons of affirmation bias, confirmation bias for some bullshit that you've made up about what you think the sun is, then I'll just argue against that. In line or not in line with heliocentric worldviews. It doesn't matter. We don't know. So we don't know what's between us and it because we've been lied to about the sky. It's not a vacuum. And that's where that claim lies.
It is handy though for a globe earther when you make a claim that you know, because then they can hold their model up in false dichotomy with your claim.
If I made one, which I don't.
You know what I
No,
always
not
found?
you
Hey, enter
specifically.
Arwin. Go ahead, Arwin.
Okay. What I always found really interesting and funny and kind of bizarre about the whole heliocentric conception about the stars is that, yeah, the inverse square law applies, so should be brighter as you approach it. Yet all these stars at all these insane different levels of distance away, sized up by astronomers, right? To be out there. Yet all the light that reaches us from all these various distances seem to be roughly equal. How does that make any intuitive sense, right? It's like all the light reaching us from all these extreme and slightly less extreme distances are all roughly equal. Like what? How do you
That's why.
even justify that in your mind as a heliocentrist?
That's why they call it. Yeah, Arwen. That's why they call it Olber's paradox.
Whose?
Olber, Olber's paradox.
Olber's paradox. Okay, lay this out for us.
Okay, if all your light is coming in parallel from stars that are infinitely, quote unquote, placed around the universe, it should be daylight 100% of the time.
Oh, right. Yes. If the stars were as big and bright as claimed, then everything should be one daylight continually everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not what you claimed, is it?
No, it isn't.
No, but he's still saying that that's one of the paradoxes of the heliocentric system. Arwin's saying it's a paradox because if you've got them all at different distances and different intensities, then that's what they should appear like, and they don't. They all roughly appear the same. Now you can look at them in closer detail and say, well, no, there's actually stark differences between them all, but to the average untrained naked eye, they all look about the same, is what Arwin's saying.
Well, look,
Yeah, but I
the
would
amount
contend
of
that that's not
luminosity
accurate.
difference isn't all that staggering, right? There's not like, oh
It
my
is.
God, that's that star again. It's like,
magnitude.
like a needle in my eye. It's so bright, and the rest, like, I can barely see it. No, it's roughly from an intensity from 1 to 4, and that's it. There's no extremities, and there should be a lot of them.
Why do they accept paradoxes? That's my question.
Because the heliocentric model is fake.
And
But they
Wakey
do,
interviewed
Owen,
that.
they do adjust distances based on luminosity. So they do say this one looks less bright, so it is further, and this one looks more bright, so therefore it's larger. So they've got either a size transformation or a distance transformation to justify those variations in the starlight. So
Yeah,
sort
but
of
they assign that
back-engineer it.
arbitrarily, either bigger or farther away, but it still doesn't make any sense.
Within the
That
model.
all of that would reach us at roughly equal level with all these insane astronomical distances in this inverse square law of light. It's insane.
When you point out an issue, so when Wakey highlighted an issue to an astrophysicist, her reaction was, well, then that needs changing within the model. In other words, there's an easy flip of a switch between what is representative or descriptive of physical reality versus how it works within the model. These higher-ups within the heliocentric hierarchy can very easily switch between those two different positions at the drop of a hat. And when one is incorrect, doesn't work, shown to be wrong, they can just say, well, that needs to be corrected within the model then, doesn't it? In other words, there's a big disconnect that can be implied at any stage should anything not quite jive in the model. It's like, oh, okay, I understand that it's a model now, that it's not working and not representative of physical reality. But obviously the rest of the time and everything else that's not broken and does work is representative of physical reality.
Right,
Yeah,
they don't face paradoxes like it's a catastrophe.
Something to figure out. Yeah, just something to work out. There's a problem within the model
exactly.
description. Exactly.
When a paradox is always assigned like syntax error, the entire thing is completely screwed. That's the alarms that should be going off when they find a paradox.
When Michio Kaku's describing some paradox within dark matter and the mathematics thereof, He's joking and laughing about it. It's all very amusing how far they off in science. That would be pseudoscience bullshit story time. But how far they off? Wow, it's amazing. We're off to this massive factor. It's like he's not worried about it, is he? It's like almost amusing to him.
Isn't a paradox basically a contradiction? And doesn't that break the law of non-contradiction?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, married bachelor. The two cannot be
So
in existence. It's not a possibility to have that. You can't have a
they
married
just
bachelor. But when a married bachelor appears in the heliocentric model, it's, wow, isn't this an amusing paradox we can talk about in terms of how our world being sphere-shaped in a vacuum doesn't work? Isn't that interesting? And everyone goes, yeah, wow. Isn't that interesting?
So they just put a fancy word on contradiction so they can actually accept the contradiction.
Yeah, call it a paradox.
They use the paradox to be philosophically edgy sounding.
Yep, that's right, Arwin.
The paradox only works if everyone accepts the premise. But the premise has been falsified, so it's now just a contradiction within their model.
Yes. A contradiction within a model is very different to a paradox. A paradox would imply that this is something that doesn't work in physical reality but still exists and still is part of a physical reality that you understand to be the case. Now, if you show that the premise that's been accepted, i.e. you accept that there's a heliocentric model with a sky vacuum, and then within that model description that you've reified, something doesn't work, if you take that person out of that acceptance in the first instance, that would be a heliocentric model in a vacuum, then there's no longer a paradox about the sun being a burning ball of gas in a second law of thermodynamics violation. That is no longer a paradox, it's just a contradiction in a model description of a world we don't actually stand on. Good summary, John. It was you that did that originally and pointed out, I think it was on a show I actually labelled as paradoxes and something else, but you pointed out that a lot of these paradoxes are now solved. Why? Well, because to meet the definition of paradox, there's got to be an underlying premise that's accepted. If you undermine the premise that must be accepted, it takes away any validity to the paradox. There isn't a paradox anymore because the premise is flawed. The premise isn't real, so therefore this can't stand in contradiction in physical reality to it as a paradox because the flaw has been displayed in the premise we now no longer accept.
Yeah, it is one way to solve a paradox, I guess.
Yeah, undermine the premise it's based on, rather than trying to figure out how to make the one work and jive within the model. You say, well, the model isn't real. We're not standing on a sphere in a vacuum, so it doesn't really matter about us not having gas pressure without a container. You know, obviously natural law still applies. We must be contained. What's that? You still want to believe in rockets and spacemen? Oh, isn't that nice?
Well, they'd rather just break apart the very foundations of physical existence by saying that second law of thermodynamics doesn't apply to the Earth, right? If they're okay with paradoxes, then why not just deny the fundamental laws of physical reality?
Absolutely. If need be, you can invent a whole new dimension, if need be. You know, fourth dimension, not a problem.
They're all denying the video evidence of rockets.
No.
I've seen
No,
rockets. Rockets are cool. Burning gases going up into the sky, cool. However, they don't travel to an area that violates natural law, claimed to be a vacuum.
Yes, they did. It shows it on the video.
Hey, John, is there
What?
rockets in your kitchen?
How can you
John,
show?
you
Hold
do
on.
rockets?
Hold on. Neil's just said it shows. I said you can't have this video claimed to be in a natural law violation, and Neil's response was it shows it in the video. You're telling me they show gas pressure without a container in the video?
No, I'm looking for the rocket launch where they said it shows you the whole thing going into space and everything.
Oh,
Okay, they're never going to show you them going through the wardrobe and the actual transitional stage, akin to the TARDIS when it shows it going through all those wibbly-wobbly colours. Yeah, as it's travelling to a different timeline or whatever it is claimed by the TARDIS to be shown in that particular sequence, right? You want to see the sequence of going to a place that doesn't exist, like going to Narnia or going through time in the TARDIS. Well, they can claim to show you that, but the place they're going to fundamentally isn't real. They're not going there. So to say I need to see an unedited footage of them going into Narnia or space, the sky vacuum, no, they're not doing that. The other day we didn't labour it enough when 10th was like, what do you mean they're claiming this entity in a sky vacuum called the ISS, a light in the sky that we experience that will be replaced with another claim to be entity in a sky vacuum, regardless of what they claim to be the end of the life cycle for the current justification for that light. That's the ISS. It's in a pool. It's not hurtling around a sphere Earth in a sky vacuum. That's nonsense. It's just a little story that they put up on TV to justify this light that we can see.
Well, they say they have unedited video of it.
Hang on. John, can you have unedited video of shooting a rocket in your kitchen?
Well, that's what I was about to say. What they're doing is they're assuming the black bit that they see above them is, they're doing the same thing they always do. They're just assuming that that's a vacuum, and then because something is filming that black bit, therefore they went into a vacuum.
No. In your model of a sphere house domain, you said that the distance to the light fixture was assumed to be infinite. Well, obviously, if you've got that reified into physical existence, there's a very long journey, potentially, between you and that lighting fixture, isn't there? With it assumed to be infinite. Therefore, can we have a launch video, unedited, from you to the presupposed infinite distance to that lighting fixture? Now, that's a very long journey that you could potentially broadcast with a transition from your gas pressure into your also gas pressure. Doesn't matter that you haven't got a vacuum, you do have an infinite distance to it, don't you? So that's a journey you could be showing us without edits, isn't it, John?
What? Yes, but hold on a second. I just understood yesterday that my kitchen was a sphere. So I need a little time before I can start journeying into this sky thing.
That's all right. I could give you that time as an extra dimension. I mean, what more do you need?
John, it's time to get out of the kitchen.
Have you got an extractor
Is that a
fan?
geodesic statement?
Don't complicate things with extractor fans.
10th man knows about kitchens. John, it's time to get out of the kitchen.
You got to wait for the
John,
JFK speech.
John, did you get your kitchen from iSphere? I mean, IKEA.
Okay, so for some reason the Discord's kicked off because we've started talking about your kitchen.
That's IKEA, not IKEA.
We got to wait for the JFK
If you hate speech, then just don't talk.
We got to wait for the JFK speech. We got to make it to the ceiling fan.
We're going to make it to the moon.
Yes. I'm going to get Neil to do it. No, I need somebody from Massachusetts.
I could do a Boston accent. Just
Oh,
look
yeah.
under the carpet.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
we'll
I'm
be
gonna get Neil to do
launching from the carpet, and the blood that's spilled, we will conquer the moon. What does he say?
That's a pretty
Not
good
because it's
Kennedy,
easy.
Neil.
Don't
Not
ask
because it's
what your
easy.
country could do for you, but what you can do for your country.
That speech made no sense. We're going to do it because it's hard. Okay. That seems very stupid. You're just
That's
going
what
to
I
do
was
it because
looking
it's really
for.
difficult. Okay. That doesn't seem like
No,
a
they're
good
doing it for the
excuse to do
challenge
it.
of it.
It's also hard to drive a nail into your own eyeball.
Yeah, that's really difficult. Why didn't he do that? That's much harder.
Because it's
Maybe
been
that
done
was the blood he
before.
was talking about.
Yeah, but he's not going to drive a nail into his eyeball socket because it's easy. You know, he's going to do it because it's specifically hard to do, right? Because that's a justification for doing things, isn't it?
Yeah, but people have done that before.
I'm
I
going to
don't
push
think
this car
anybody has
by
ever
hand.
faked a moon landing before, Nathan.
I'm going to
That's
push
really
this car
hard to...
uphill by hand, not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Listen, Joe Rogan believes it. Joe Rogan believes it, so it's law. They went to the moon.
What's so hard about a swimming pool?
Nobody's ever given Nathan $1 million super chat before, and that's not easy. So somebody
Okay.
needs to do that.
It's hard.
I don't think that's possible. I don't think that literally Google allows that number to be that high.
Nathan, I took pictures of the second book, Master Brief, if you want to use that to round out.
Okay, so I've got an introduction to nautical science.
Yeah, this is the one I quoted, and it finally came in. So, by Carl Chase, if you go to the first page there, under the chapter 13, the sextant, the modern sextant, we'll just go, well, let's just go to the second thing. The sextant is an optical instrument which measures the angle formed between two visible points and the observer's eye. So, I mean, we all know that. It is generally capable of accuracy to 1/10 of a minute. Celestial navigation, the angle we will measure with the sextant is the angle of elevation. So there's that angle of elevation that cannot work with a curved adjacent, obviously. So let's see, of the celestial body, we are using as a reference point above the horizon. We call this angle the altitude of the body and sometimes refer to it as height of body above the horizon. It is always expressed in degrees, minutes, and tenths of a minute. The modern sextant is descended from early angle measuring tools, such as the astrolabe and crossstaff. The astrolabe actually measured the zenith distance of a body directly, since it used gravity, the vertical, like a plumb bob, as its reference instead of the horizon. It's hard to imagine being able to use it on the deck of a rolling ship. However, and in any case, for either of these instruments, accuracy to within a whole degree would have been difficult. The deck of a rolling ship still is a challenge to the navigator. But with a little practice, accurate measurements can be made fairly easy with the modern sextant. Go to the next page. So this one, as it talks about index correction, if it's on the arc, it's off. If it's off the arc, it's on. You make that index correction in advance. If we read what it says, which means that if the error is forward on the arc, then it must be subtracted from the angle measured by the sextant and vice versa. This is the first correction made to height sextant. The next thing we must account for is the fact that the horizon we see is not really 90 degrees from our zenith or from vertical, unless our eye is right at sea level. At sea level, the horizon is tangent to the sea surface and at right angles to the vertical. Remember, they said, don't say 90, don't say right angle. Remember all that? This is out of their own books. But as our height of eye gets higher, the visible horizon dips lower and lower. The higher our eye, the bigger the amount of this dip angle. Dip is purely a function of our height of eye. So that height is known. Dip can be calculated. There's a table inside of the front cover of the Nautical Almanac that provides this. Last page here. So as we read here, of these three sources of error, one is constant, the other two are inversely related to apparent altitude. This allows for all three to be lumped together into a single table found inside the front cover almanac called the altitude correction table for the sun. The table is entered first at appropriate month, then for the apparent altitude. And the total correction is taken from the upper limb or lower limb column, depending on which way the sun was observed. The correction is a number of minutes of angle and is added to or subtracted from the apparent altitude. The result of this is now the true altitude of the sun, called the height observed, or HO. This corrected altitude of the sun above the horizon, listen in, Bob, if subtracted from 90, right angle, boys, would give us an exact zenith distance of the sun at the moment we took the sight. We will use this height observed in calculating a line of position. Thank you very much for including it in all your books. The Earth is flat.
With that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Programming streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, smashed the PayPal link and all that good stuff. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy, and this is of particular note if you drive an electric vehicle. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either premiering streams. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!